And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Warburg Infusion Entertainment Review. It's time for episode number 71. I'm one of your hosts, Thomas, aka Mr. Warburg. Alongside me, as always, is Patrick, aka Mr. Fusion. Hang on, you are muted.
Greetings and salutations. I'll even do that in my Rush Limbaugh voice. Greetings and salutations, everybody. Hopefully,
Of
everyone's
course,
having a
you
good
have a
week.
Rush Limbaugh. Of all the
Greetings and
radio guys to bust out,
salutations.
Rush
I
Limbaugh.
could actually Rush is over exaggerated, but if you put a little bit of a like a frog in your throat, you could easily do Alex Jones. You go from greetings to greetings and salutations, everybody. Hi, I'm Alex Jones. I want to talk about conspiracies tonight. We're going to talk about how frogs are turning gay in America, guys. Yeah, I actually took a call when I worked in radio because I actually have worked with Alex Jones, who is a big piece of shit, by the way. And during his show, I actually took calls to mess with people, and I would do the Alex Jones voice, and it was
That's
much better back.
fantastic.
It was much better back then, and I would just be like a total dick to people, like,
Ah,
what? No, 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 we're not putting that on the air, not tonight. Nope, we're not doing that. So
that's
anyway,
fantastic.
greetings, everybody. Let's talk some good movies, man.
All right,
Let's talk
from
some.
Fusion being muted on the intro to an
Yeah,
Alex Jones impression, banger of an intro. Straight up, I might be putting that whole thing up on TikTok. That was fantastic.
classic.
All right,
Rack 'em, rack 'em.
for episode 71, I can't even get the word episode out. We're starting off so strong. We're gonna talk Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning. We're gonna rank the Mission Impossible movies, and we'll hit some other odds and ends like Nimona. Fusion's caught up on Silo. Talk a little Strange New Worlds, and of course, the big elephant in the room when we're talking entertainment media. That is SAG has now joined WGA on the picket lines, and the Directors Guild has yet to ratify their contract. So
Yeah.
that's an interesting note as well. So we'll touch on all those later at the end of the show. To start off, we're going to go through our kind of spoiler-free impressions of Dead Reckoning, a little notes on like how much it made at the box office. Then we'll do some spoiler talk where we think they're going for Dead Reckoning Part 2, which of course has suspended production because of said strikes. And then we'll talk about ranking the movies and then get into our odds and ends at the end. So Fusion, we'll start off with you because I've done a lot of talking here. What is your coming out of the movie theater, you're sitting in your car on your way home. What is your thoughts about Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning?
If I had to give it a number, I'd say 9.5 out of 10. That means that was like spectacular. It's not a perfect film by any stretch, but it was fucking fun. And this is why, like, I know we talk about Hollywood inundating us with summer blockbusters every year going forward. This was different. This was a very like dedicated piece by Tom Cruise to make sure that people had a great movie experience with Mission Impossible. Every year every movie he tries to up the ante with his stunts, and he did that this several times in this film. But overall, cast was great, good story, great music. There were a few things I do want to be a little nitpicky about when we get to spoilers, but man, I had a blast, man. And I will tell you, like, because it was a Mission Impossible spy movie, I kicked off my night with some mozzarella sticks and an old fashioned, man. Nothing like a nice sharp old fashioned at the draft house. And yeah, I had a blast. I really did.
Sounds
How
good.
about you?
For me, it was a bit of a step
Mhm.
down from Rogue Nation and Fallout, which I think are one of the best one-two punches in action movie history. They just
Okay.
go so perfectly together. You've got the more kind of fun, like not fun, but like they get serious at the end. But like the tone is a little lighter in Rogue Nation. Fallout gets heavy because the
Yep.
name would imply that. The scores match their tones as well, but the themes are married to each other because they're Christopher McQuarrie movies, so he did them both. And like those movies just work so well together as a pair that I don't think this one had a chance of beating it, to be honest. But that being said, I would put it in between Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation for right now in terms of my enjoyment level. And we'll talk
Okay.
about our actual ranking later, but that's just my kind of boilerplate takeaway from the movie. It was fun, it was engaging. There were some parts I really liked. The set pieces, as always, I mean, they built an entire Orient Express to destroy it. Like this the kind of dedication we're talking here. And it definitely showed, and I was a little bummed it made a little less than Fallout, but that's kind of this summer in movie theaters. It just seems to be a little lighter than every expectation. Every single movie seems to be doing worse
Yeah.
than expectations, and that leads to it's no longer just a one note, it's a trend. So it's not really the movie's fault. It made 56.2 million at the box office. Fallout, the predecessor, hit 61, but of course that's pre-pandemic. I think it was pre-pandemic, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
it had to have been pre-pandemic.
19,
And
yeah.
this one had a weirder opening schedule because it came out in a 5-day window instead of a 3-day window. The 5-day window was 80 million and 235 million globally over that stretch of time. So, you know, it should make its money back relatively quickly. Then again, with Hollywood money making, it'll never make its money back, so no one will ever get paid, right? Yay, Hollywood. Uh,
Right.
though in fairness, it probably is. They probably do pay significantly better in terms of their residual deals because Tom Cruise is involved and it's his production company. Like, they probably are better at that than most movies. Especially the stuff with and all the stuff that's coming out with the SAG strike, which we'll get into about like how Men in Black's never made a profit. All these years later, and all the times it's played on TV, never made a profit. Really?
Yeah.
Uh, so that's a different conversation for later. But so yeah, 235 million. I'm hoping it'll continue, and it won't like fall off the cliff like some other movies have this summer. But who knows? Elemental seems to be doing super well now on the back end. But that's a different conversation. But how far do we want to go before we get into spoilers?
I think to me, I will say before we go into spoilers, two problems I had was the plot had a few little corny aspects to it for me, and then I thought there was I don't know about you, but I felt that, and like I said, this was a great movie overall, but still, they felt like they really added a lot more comedy to this one than they have in previous films. And
Yeah,
what I
it,
mean
it
by
felt
that,
more in that Ghost Protocol vein.
but not even, yeah, but it was more ha-ha-y to me. Like they were trying to make sure like this is a laugh moment versus where it was just the cast was so really Simon Pegg's phenomenal, like the nuances of Ghost Protocol where you're like, okay, that was funny, but you weren't like ha-ha. Whereas they really tried to like the dialogue had you going, okay, this they're obviously playing off of each other in a much more relaxed state, right? But
Hmm.
um, I will say this before we get into spoilers. I do kind of like the quiet jab that they took at the Fast and Furious franchise with the "I've got family" kind of thing. I don't know if you caught that. I did, and I thought that was kind of funny.
Yeah, that and for me, Haley Atwell is the big new introduction to the cast. I thought she was fantastic. I'm
Yep.
curious. I have some theories on what the big reveal with her character is going to be in part two because they
Okay.
reference it a few times. Oh, she's got no past. She's an orphan, and I'm like, well, Haley Atwell is 20 years younger than Cruz, and they introduced some new parts to Ethan Hunt's story we have never seen before. I wonder if those two things might be connected. What that's for a later conversation in the podcast. Also, I thought the villain was a step down. Solomon Lane was a fantastic villain. Henry Cavill was a fantastic villain in the last movie. So kind of like how Ghost Protocol's villain wasn't going to live up to Philip Seymour Hoffman in 3. I just didn't expect the villain to be the standout. And at this point in the franchise, it probably shouldn't. If the cast is, all bringing their A game as on the hero side, the villain probably shouldn't be the standout. But I really enjoyed that main cast. Obviously, Vin Rames is back, Simon Pegg, Rebecca Ferguson, all back in terms of the main IMF cast. Plus, Kittredge is back,
Yep.
and also you're continuing to bring in the White Widow and her brother character, who are the children of Max from the first movie.
Back
So they're
first
starting to
movie.
tie in a lot more pieces of past, stories in the Mission Impossible universe together, which makes me wonder what else is going to come back for part two. You know, I have theories.
Okay.
So, that out of the way, let's get into some spoiler talk.
Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert!
Okay, so for me, I'll take this one first. So the big plot reveal is that it's actually outright stated in the beginning that the overarching villain, is actually an artificial intelligence that's gone rogue. It's a
Yep.
spy intelligence AI system that has gone rogue. It was trying to sabotage a Russian sub. It does, but then goes rogue and starts working for its own ends. And in the pre-show, we talked about Person of Interest, and I was like, "How much you want to bet Christopher McCurry has watched that show?" But so there's your AI, and it's got a human agent and a human cast doing its bidding, but they're never really driving the action once the reveal happens with the whole like thing about the AI has gained sentience, and it takes a little while for like that to sink in, and for the characters like, holy shit, basically the world's gonna end, but in like in a way that no one will know it ended, you know, which is a pretty interesting sci-fi concept, and is a little highbrow for what Mission Impossible has normally done. So I'm not sure how well that's going to land for most people, but I liked the swing, and it's pretty on point given that one of the main sticking points of SAG and WGA is AI.
Yep,
So rather
obviously.
timely in that sense. But one note before I kick it over to you: the fact that this AI god is terrified of Ethan Hunt. They only say it like 2 or 3 times that like, no, it's not. It doesn't. It's not that it knows everything about us. It's that it thinks you're the only one that can beat it. It is terrified of you, and it's trying to stack the deck against you, and is failing. I fucking love that whole point. It's always in the background. It's never like beating over your head with it. But damn, it's good. And I
Yeah.
really loved it. So Fusion, what's some of your spoiler thoughts on this movie?
Um, I thought the big swerve being that Kietrich on that train being the big reveal that they were involved the whole time. The America was involved with the negotiation. I thought that was kind of shitty, just only because of the fact that if in part two, if we go with the whole thing of like it, I have a feeling that it's going to be a flash forward only because of Haley Atwell, because of Grace's character basically going to Kittredge and saying, "I want to basically be a spy now from for IMF," right? So it feels like there has to be a flash forward, but if there is, then so Ethan's just walking around with his key for a few years and just like what's going on? Like
Yeah,
there's
how
just
long of a jump? Like we
how
talking
long? How
six
long of a jump
months?
is it? Yeah, is it years? Like, yeah, it's going to be a little weird for me, like what they do with part two. But with that said, kind of that big swerve on the train, you're finding out like, hey, what's going on with U.S. is basically they've been involved with the negotiations the whole time. They want to get their shit back, but they want to, Kittredge wants to be able to control the world with the entity is what they keep calling it. Um, I thought that was a little weird. I thought we didn't get enough into Palm, is it Palm Cleef? Clementif? Palm
Yeah, her
Clementif?
character was great.
Paris. I loved Paris. I thought we needed more of her. The fight scenes, was it in Paris that they
No, it
had the
was
chase
Rome.
scenes? That was Rome, okay. Um, Phenomenal chase scenes there. Like there's just so many things that I liked about it. I think the jokes were a little weird at times, a little uncomfortable, but I get why they're doing this because we're kind of showing, hey, these three guys have been together for a very long time now. They've done a lot of very different missions for a very long time. They have this is their family. But then I like the reveal. Like I get the whole kind of like yeah, I've got family, the Fast and Furious joke that they kind of made. But I get the idea of we learned that they are all a part of IMF because they were all criminals at one point. That they were given the chance to come in and become spies for the U.S. government. I'm like, okay, I like that idea because now we have a layer of backstories to everyone, and it doesn't make what's his name, Gabriel's attachment to Ethan sound weird. Like in another life, oh, he lost a love interest, and Gabriel was a part of that whole thing, and it creates a very different layered approach because all these folks are like, hey, at one time or another, I had a troubled past, and then IMF basically gave me the option, and I have to become about that life. I liked that kind of that telling of that story, and I know the original series was somewhat similar in that, but not every character was a criminal in the original TV show back in the '60s. So,
Yeah.
um, I liked that. There were layers of it. Like there was a lot of different layers. Music was good, the big stunt, but there were several different stunts that were pretty cool in this movie. So yeah, man, I think for me, I think should have been a little bit more of Paris, like a little more dialogue with her, but I get it, she's Gabriel's muscle. The entity, it was kind of funny that it's afraid of Ethan Hunt of all people, kind of that whole Chuck Norris kind of meme thing. I get it, I like it. I'm very
He
curious
is the
though
living
where
manifestation of destiny.
yeah, he is, he really is. I'm very curious what it means for Gabriel's character, just because like this guy obviously was brought in by the entity to be the living opposite of Ethan Hunt because he knows his past. Okay, well then obviously this AI knows a lot more, even more in terms of like history of people than we can imagine. I do like the social commentary. Yes, AI is a big problem with Hollywood and the strike right now, but I like the social commentary of like the like what AI can do, and like you pointed on this, whenever we talk about like the negative effects of AI moving forward and its growth in our society, they always talk about big over the top events, right? This was more of, like you said, a very subtle takeover of the world to where
Yeah.
people wouldn't even know. And I like that idea.
Mhm. And again, yeah, just it was a little highbrow for what Mission Impossible has been
Yeah,
so
yeah,
far.
yeah.
And it's gonna probably land with people differently than like, hey, we're gonna nuke the world's largest glacier and basically starve half the world, right? Like different kind of, you know, what we have to do to stop the big bad kind of story, but still fun. For me, the other one of the other big points is I thought Rebecca Ferguson. I thought her character kind of got the short shrift a little bit,
Yeah.
like because it sure felt like they were setting her up to kind of fully join the IMF in
Yeah.
Fallout.
In this movie, they basically, like, from start to end, have they scripted out her death. Like, you knew it was coming,
Yeah,
right?
and like, but she wasn't in the IMF. She was working solo, and the U.S.
Yeah.
put a bounty on her head, which is like crazy. And like somehow the CIA director is using IMF assets with Kittredge.
Yeah.
That because like, and they couldn't get. I'm assuming they couldn't get. Who was the CIA director in Fallout?
Uh,
What was her name?
Angela Bassett.
Yeah, like I'm sure maybe they couldn't get her to come back for a role or something because it just felt like Kittredge would have been the secretary of the IMF. Like we don't have a secretary right now. That they never show up. Maybe they haven't. Maybe they haven't replaced Alec Baldwin's character in canon. I don't know. That'll be interesting.
Well, because when you go the time gap between Ghost Protocol and Rogue Nation's only like what, like a year, if that.
Yeah, it's very close.
So we lose, I forget his name, the British actor that played the secretary, and then
Yeah,
we lose
you
him, and
know
then
him when
we
you see
lose
him.
Alec, and then we lose Alec Baldwin right after that, right?
Yeah, two
So
movies after he gets two
yeah,
movies.
he gets two movies. That's right. So it's only a couple years. So it did make sense to have a third secretary that could potentially be biting
But
the
that
bullet.
does make me wonder, doing a little prognosticating. Like I think they could, if they do a time jump, like you mentioned, they could bring back a lot of IMF characters. Like,
Yeah.
does Lawrence Fishburne's character come back?
Yep.
Does Maggie Q's character come back? Because that whole concept about how all the agents were former criminals, that's the setup of Nikita, the show. The division is full of criminals that everyone they fake their death and then now they're spies for the U.S. government. So like Nikita is very Mission Impossible as a show, and you should all watch it. But I wonder if they could bring her character back. Like, is she Haley Atwell's kind of like actual like trainer at the IMF, something like that? Because she'd be obviously a fair bit older. Maybe she's not a field agent anymore, but like things like that. I'm wondering how those two CIA operatives that were chasing Ethan are how they're gonna play in. 'Cause clearly they know of the IMF. It's not that secret to them, you know. It
You
just
bring up a good point. I think a good name to bring back to, like, become the secretary of IMF because of his history with Ethan would be William Brandt, Jeremy Renner's character.
yeah. And like
I
you
mean,
could play that you could go off with, hey, Branch got really hurt on a mission and play
yep.
into, Jeremy Renner's real life injury.
Yeah, you could have him in a wheelchair, just saying like his character suffers like a debilitating injury, but like he's still a part of government activity. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're like you know, he was recovering or something at the time when everything started, and he comes in to help save the day, and maybe he helps Luther figure out where the sub is in the next movie, because obviously they're going to take a break on production for quite some time, depending on how long the
Yep.
strike lasts. So,
Yep.
the thing with Haley Atwell, I was going to mention.
Okay.
I think they're maybe setting her up to be his daughter that he didn't know about or something, because they kept showing flashes of this woman that Gabriel killed, and
Mhm.
she's basically exactly 20 years younger than Cruz.
And remember, this was before he joined IMF when he was a criminal.
Yeah, so like she would have been, like a very young kid at the
Ethan
time.
coming. Yeah.
So you maybe wouldn't remember him, or maybe she didn't know he was her dad, and that she's been an orphan because Gabriel killed her mom, and then the government faked Ethan's death and made him a spy. Like I could see that kind of reveal happening, and that being like a thing where like Ethan figures that out, but he knows the AI doesn't know that. So like clearly it doesn't know everything. So That could be maybe
That
like a linchpin kind of moment.
is that kind of is that too cheesy of a swerve though to have it
I
kind of
think so. I don't think it's likely, but like
it's not a jump the shark moment though, is it?
no, not for the crazy shit they've done in these movies.
Yeah.
It was just weird that they decided to introduce that backstory.
Yeah.
That was weird.
Yeah, because after the submarine cold opening, then we get this very early on,
Yep.
the flashback for him,
Yeah.
and you're like, what's the deal with that flashback? And then you learn through the dialogue that it was when Ethan was a criminal before he joined IMF. That's how he
And again,
knows.
why is Kittredge giving him the mission brief? He's the CIA director.
Yep.
Why would he be giving the IMF a mission brief?
Yep.
That's weird. Don't like that. So yeah, that's where those kind of inconsistencies push it down from Fallout and Rogue Nation for me. So
Now I'm looking over at the Wikipedia. They have Kittredge listed as the director of both CIA and the IMF.
oh, so he took over the IMF.
Yeah, that's what it. I mean, there may have been something in that room, the dialogue in that room at the very beginning that kind of leads you to believe that he's leading both of them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's interesting.
So I forget his name. Kari
Carrie
Kari
OS.
Elvis. He
He's the
plays
director of National Intelligence.
National
He's the
Intelligence. That's
DNI.
right. Yeah. So it makes sense that Kittredge is that was a good way for them to bring him back because he was over the CIA, but then he took over the IMF after Alec Baldwin's character
Yeah.
died. Maybe.
I do hope they're able to bring Renner's character back in some way. Because they obviously there was a lot of parts in this movie towards the end where they're clearly setting up part two, right? Like Luther like basically says to the audience, "You won't see me the rest of this movie.
Yeah.
I'm piecing out."
I'm
You
leaving.
know, because he's going on a mission, right? Like it's going to be crucial to part two. So you can see the seams of where they're setting up for part two, and I do wonder if this could have been a 2-hour movie. To be honest. I don't know if we needed all this convoluted backstory about Gabriel and Ethan's opposite. It could have just been a simple AI story. So I don't want to judge it too harshly because we haven't seen part two yet. I just think it was a step down.
I really liked it. I get your thoughts on it. For me, it was another a consecutive quality movie. That's how I feel. I'm not saying that it keeps going up and up and up in terms of like quality, but for me, this was a good fun film for the summer. And did it exceed my expectations? It actually met them. That doesn't mean it was an average score. So just like I said, if I had to give it out a 10, 9.5, only because like every layer about it was really awesome. The music, the cast, the story, everything. The action was incredible. Everything I really enjoyed about it. And I think for me, I get why you think, hey, we could have done without this, but I think we're opening up something towards the future with Ethan, and that's why when you brought up the idea about Grace being his daughter, uh, to me that comes across as cheesy, but it would make sense in part two only because of the fact that we're building towards something with Ethan's backstory, not just Gabriel, because it's not because you feel like it's something else. There's something else there that's going to be like, hey, we're going to learn more in part two of Ethan's past, and it's going to come into play into the story. Versus, it's just there for Gabriel's story. No, I didn't. It didn't feel like that was just the only way for them to bring in Gabriel. There's something else there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, all right. Those are kind of our spoiler thoughts on Mission Impossible.
Yep.
Anything else you want to touch on?
No, man, excited for part two. I can't wait for part two, which will be quite a ways away.
Yeah, it was slated for next June, but that's going to be delayed for sure.
Did they even start production?
They had started, but they will stop, obviously, for the strike. So, what we're going to do next is kick over to... Whoops, wrong one. Nope, wrong one again. Hey, there we go. We're going to rank the Mission Impossible movies. There are 7 so far. Obviously 8 with Dead Reckoning Part 2 coming out next year. And I assume that'll be the last one with Tom Cruise. And I'm 100% buying the 4K collection of that. Or whatever. Maybe 8K, whatever, by then. I'm going to buy that because it's going to be awesome. So, are we both in agreement? Mission Impossible 2 goes at the bottom?
Yeah, that's the worst one.
I think that's an easy... No, is it Mission : Impossible or just Mission Impossible? I can never remember.
It's Mission : Impossible. M:I dash number.
There we go.
Another colon.
So for my money, the original goes at 6.
Mission Impossible at 6. I'm fair with that. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I
Yeah.
think it's a big jump. It's a big gap between 6 and 7, though.
Yeah, they're really, yeah, yes. Now it gets
Now we're getting
fun.
into the tricky part.
Okay.
So, where do you think? Where do we put? Who do we put as the fifth movie, the fifth
Okay.
best
Well,
movie?
since we said there's a huge jump from 7 to 6, a huge jump, because Mission Impossible, it's not a great film, but it's not a bad film. Um, I'm gonna say the next one is Mission Impossible 3, even though I really enjoyed that film. Yeah.
It is really stylized in some spots that hurts it in my eyes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very J.J. Abrams at his
Yeah.
Abramsiest.
You got you have lens flares. Yes. Yeah. It does. Going like I went and watched it a couple weeks ago. It does feel like it was a good jump into getting where we needed to be with Mission Impossible versus where it was heading with Mission Impossible 2. But and Philip Seymour Hoffman being the slime ball villain, loved it, loved it. But yeah, I would say this one's probably 5 for me.
Okay, I can 100% agree with that. So that means
Okay.
I assume we're going Ghost Protocol at 4. The fourth movie goes 4.
I'm okay with that. Yeah, Ghost Protocol. Still, my of all the chase scenes, my favorite with the sandstorm.
They have the sandstorm and the scene right before with the climbing up the tower.
Climbing.
Just awesome stuff.
Yep.
Awesome stuff.
Okay, so 4 is Ghost Protocol.
Yeah. So 3, this is where it's going to get very tricky.
Yeah.
For me, I'd put Dead Reckoning here.
Thinking.
I don't think this movie stands up to Rogue Nation or Fallout for me. So I'd go Dead Reckoning right here.
Okay, you go Dead Reckoning. I'm okay with that. Yeah. I'm thinking through. I was watching both the other 2 movies in my mind really fast, and I'm gonna say, yeah, I'm okay with that. Dead Reckoning at 3. Yeah.
And now I know we're split here because I actually think Rogue Nation is a better movie. Do you think it's Fallout at number 1 or 2?
No, man. I'm gonna say Rogue Nation is number 1.
Yeah.
I really loved Rogue Nation.
Okay. Well, we have our list then.
I mean, you talk about fucking opening in the first act, blowing up a chunk of the Kremlin. Come on.
No, that's
Wait, was that Rogue
that's
Nation?
Ghost Nation.
That's
Ghost Protocol.
That's Ghost Protocol. I'm sorry.
So for me, what separates Fallout and Rogue Nation is the final act. The tension of Fallout is incredible, but that like the after action climax, like that the falling action, is significantly more Mission Impossible fun in Rogue Nation. The whole thing when they trap the bad guy and you have the twist of what they're doing, it all comes together so damn well. Whereas in Fallout, he's gonna catch Cavill and get the button, right? Like it's gonna happen,
Yeah.
right? Whereas in Rogue Nation, he's getting chased by Solomon Lane, and you don't know how they're gonna catch him. You know they're going to, but you don't know how, right? Like there's so many moving parts going on with all the characters doing different things that don't seem related to each other. And then the reveal comes together, they get him in the box, and he's like, Solomon Lane, meet the IMF, and the score swells up. It is perfect Mission Impossible. Fallout is amazing, but it's just missing that kind of magic with the IMF that I really missed a little bit, and especially missed it in Dead Reckoning. So that's my take on it. That's why I put it at number 1. You still vibing with that, or do you want to fight me on putting Fallout at number 1?
No, I'm thinking about it because Rogue Nation, that fucking intense scene in the water tank. Yeah, where he's trying to get the drive inside of that water factory, and he has to dive in without any oxygen.
Oh yeah, that thing.
That was like that was pure panic for me, just because like that was one of my
that and the flying off, the being strapped to an airplane for the stunt.
He was,
like the guy's insane, and it's just Rogue Nation is just nonstop an incredible time. It's got one thing that doesn't work quite great for me, and that's the car flipping backwards through the parking lot thing. I'm like, they're both dead. Like, no matter what, they're dead, right?
But to be fair, there's so many movies, action movies, where we have car flipping and everyone survives.
It's true. It just takes me out of it, and it doesn't look great either. It's one of
Yeah,
the only things in that movie that doesn't look amazing. Everything else is damn near perfect.
yeah.
And like I said, the score just fits that Mission Impossible tone just a touch more for me for hitting me where I want in when I'm watching one of these movies than Fallout. Even though Fallout is an incredible movie, that could only happen because of the plot points of Rogue Nation. Like they go together so well. So for me, there's a very clear demarcation between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, another gap, 2, or Mission Impossible 1, and then another gap, Mission Impossible 2.
That's
So,
fair. That's fair. For me, it feels like there's a very small gap between Rogue Nation at one Fallout. For me, just because I think Fallout was a very, it felt like what we got out of Dead Reckoning, and that's we're setting up much more about Ethan's personal story, versus like we have an ensemble. Ethan's the lead of this group that's trying to save the world, where that's always the case, but this was more of we're putting we're putting the wraps on one piece of Ethan's story to start up the next chapter, right? Um, and I was hoping to get more of Rebecca Ferguson going forward, other than just one film, but
well,
whatever.
1.5. Well, she got
Well,
3.
then- No, I know, but I was hoping for more of that because like the first two films, we kind of circled around things with her and Ethan, right? With
Yeah.
Isla and Ethan. So, and then at the end of Fallout, it was like kind of, you know, like we set in stone that those two were going to have a deep bond, right? Which, now that I think about it, I thought it was awkward that there were scenes in Dead Reckoning with Haley Atwell and Rebecca Ferguson and Tom Cruise. Like, is this a triangle? But
No,
it
I don't
makes more
think there's
sense. No,
no
no, no.
scenes that are she's love interest
Romantically
vibe.
intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it does make sense, man, that your theory of the bloodline connection going forward,
Yeah, like that nobody is aware of.
and it does hand the torch off should Tom Cruise decide to retire himself from these movies at the end of part two.
Yeah, even though, yeah, but like, I don't know if she would want that. It's pretty physically demanding.
Yeah.
Not that it's impossible, but I mean, like, nobody's Tom Cruise. Like, nobody's out there getting strapped to planes to take off. Even,
No, it's
even
going to be
Keanu
a
Reeves
major.
doesn't do that shit.
It's going to be a major step down to whoever. If they carry these films forward without Tom Cruise, it's going to be a step down with stunts. It's going to have to naturally be that way.
Yeah,
This is the only guy. He's the only person that's willing. Like he's the only actor willing to do this crazy shit that's not a stunt.
yeah. I could see
Performer.
Mission Impossible post Tom Cruise moving into the streaming show model.
That would be cool.
Because you'd still be able to give it a
There's
lot of money per episode. It's
There's
a
a lot
big,
of
it's a
like,
big name IP
yeah,
that I could see them wanting to turn into a long running series because that's
yep,
how it started, was a show
yep, yep,
way
yep.
back in the day. That was the 70s, right?
60s, late
60s,
60s,
yeah.
actually, late 60s.
So there's clearly a precedent there for it being a network show. So I could see them
That
going
was
that route.
that was Leonard Nimoy's second show after Star Trek got canceled.
Yeah.
It was a Mission Impossible.
Yeah. So
Um, I think you're right. I think it would be a great show. There, you could tell a lot more like ground level story mission, like spy stories out of it, and you don't have to worry about everything being so over the top and big loud explosions. Um, yeah. I think Rogue Nation is a deserving number one with you know
agreed.
with Fallout right after and Ghost Protocol. Yeah, I think that's a good layout there, man. I'm confident with that.
Agreed. So, all right, where do we want to go next? We've got a few different things to touch on. So we've got Strange New World. We've got Silo, another Rebecca Ferguson connection there. We want to talk Silo.
Let's do Silo because it's a good transition. Because I think obviously Rebecca Ferguson's playing a much bigger role, was playing a much bigger role in Hollywood, and that's why she got the Silo lead. And apparently she's also in Dune 2. And if they do a third film, I think she's going to be getting some Academy nominations for Dune 2 going forward. I think the Bene Gesserit, is it the Bene Gesserit?
Bene Gesserit, yeah.
Bene Gesserit. Their story gets much deeper in part 2, so I think you're going to see a lot more of her in part 2, and I think she's going to get some nominations out of that. But I think she's also going to get some Emmy nominations for Silo next year.
Agreed. She was fantastic.
Yeah.
So
Let's
Silo,
talk about Silo, man.
What? So you just got caught up It's a very
Yep.
post-apocalypse sci-fi setting,
Yep.
but they don't know how the apocalypse happened. It's kind of a black box kind of mystery, peel back the layer kind of show. What was your takeaway from season one?
There were slow moments in each episode, but there were also intense, not action per se, but intense moments in each episode. But it wasn't nuanced like a studio exec made them do beats, like boom, 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 action, boom, 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 action, boom, boom, boom. Like they needed to have sequences in the script that called for. They didn't do it like that. Whatever, if there was action or if there were intense moments of like high drama, high energy drama, it was the story carried it to those moments versus you know, a formulaic approach, which I thought was good. There were some slow moments, and particularly the first episode for me. Like I didn't watch it all the first day. Like I watched half of it and I was like, this is pretty slow. Then the next day I sat down, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna watch it, and then boom, I'm like, okay, I'm into. I'm episode one's done. Let me get into episode two, and then we get Rebecca Ferguson full time going forward, and she's phenomenal from the moment she's introduced all the way through this. She's great, and I think the rest of the cast was really solid. A good story. Taking the idea of like the Fallout bunkers without the sci-fi action-packed hokey approach to it, because it is a video game. This was much more political, much more social and political thinking, and I understand why. It's a little deeper. I did read the books. I went back and kind of sifted through. I know they announced season two, so I'm really happy with if they keep it as a faithful adaptation to those stories. It's going to be a good show. It will be season two, three will be good.
And I
Now,
don't know if you knew this, but it was a Graham Yost show. He was the showrunner.
yes,
Graham
yes,
Yost was showrunner of some majorly successful drama shows.
Justified being one of those.
Yeah, so like, it was a really well handled dramatic show. I think episode three is the standout for me. That whole sequence with the generator. Good
Yep.
lord, what an
Oh
incredible
man,
sequence! It's awesome.
that was like 5 minutes of just like sweat. I was sweating watching that.
Yeah,
Oh
like
man,
they sucked you in, and it was never a reveal where you were ahead of the characters. You thought
no,
you might be, but you didn't know how. And then the kind of rug pull you there at the end, and it's very satisfying, with a very interesting hook for season two.
yeah.
Because I spoiled myself on the books, but clearly they're changing some things. Like some major things are different. So
Yeah, I think so. There has to be a few things, particularly because these were all short stories. The first part of the Wool, which ended up season one of Silo, is based off of all of the Wool chapters of all the short stories, right?
yeah, I think
And
so.
then I don't remember the third part of the series. I don't remember what that's called, but then the final part is Dirt. I think it's called Dirt.
Hmm.
Um, but they obviously took the first all these. He obviously took these short stories and put them in book form to tell the story. I think there will be a few changes in the second act of the saga. Just logistically speaking, it makes sense to do that. Just because in season one we had a lot of actor turnover, man. We did like there was a lot of actor turnover coming and going, and I don't think they can maintain that based off of the books, what's in the books. But there weren't too many huge swerves along the way. It was pretty linear, but um, I liked it.
Yeah, I quite
I
enjoyed
liked
it.
it.
It was definitely a surprise how much I ended up enjoying that show. It's
Yeah.
definitely what I've been trying to recommend to more people. It's quite fun.
Now it's one of those situations where if Silo really hits this year and then season two comes out in a couple years and hits again, and then Fallout comes out, people are going to get a little confused because that's going to be a completely different tone, right? We both know that. So yeah, I'm very interested in it. So,
Yeah. Oh, excuse me for the yawn. So speaking of stuff I'd recommend, we should talk about the halfway point of Star Trek: Strange New Worlds.
yeah.
We're through episode 5. Since we last recorded, we had not only that we recorded right after the time travel episode, so episode 3.
Yes.
So
Mhm.
we had Among the Lotus Eaters, which was a fun kind of throwback, and it had some direct TOS canon connections because the planet and its history is mentioned a few times in TOS,
Yep.
as well as the preceding events of this episode. So it was kind of an in-between story, but done really well, and it had a great. Hey, Christopher Pike is back as a full-time actor now because he had his kid. He's back acting. Right, it's after his paternity leave.
Yeah.
Great performance from Pike. Also, great performance from Pike in episode 5. He's got some great like Captain Dad moments with Spock, you know, and Spock's Ethan Peck is going to explode after this season. He's going to be in everything. This episode was fucking amazing.
Speaking of, I wanted to bring this up. Apparently, because Strange New Worlds, I think we talked about this. Paramount's thinking about taking this show, ending it, and putting this series on the big screen, right? Making the movies going forward, Strange New World cast. I don't know if you heard, but apparently Disney is knocking down Anson Mount's door to come back as Black Bolt in several movies again. So,
given how popular, number one, his appearance as Black Bolt in Doctor Strange 2 was, also his rising popularity because of Strange New Worlds,
that's what I mean.
This whole cast is going to get rated for very cool stuff. Like Jess Bush is going to be in all the things.
I told you I love Jess Bush. I think she was great. From top to bottom, that's a really.
Oh my god, she would be in. Like, don't get me wrong, I love Kristen Ritter. She would be an incredible Jessica Jones.
Yeah, she would.
Holy shit, that didn't even hit me until just now.
Where would you? Let me ask you: if you had to put her in an action film, Christina Chong, I think she's done a great job in this show. Where would you put her? As an X-Men?
I don't even know if you do that.
She's in her late 30s, so you can't just like cast her in like one of those roles. But I could see her in a Mission Impossible.
Yeah, I was gonna say that or Bond.
Yeah, especially if Henry Cavill's James Bond, and then she plays the.
Yeah, I could see her as a rival agent or
yep.
like a villain, maybe a villain, but like a
yeah,
character
right.
in that. I could see her as a character in that universe quite easily because she is British.
I could see studios starting to clean this roster. That doesn't mean that they can't come back, but I mean like they're gonna start putting them in films just because it's a phenomenal cast.
They're all amazing.
They're amazing. They're likable. Their story's great. Like you said, Ethan Peck. I think that dude's on the rise with this show. This is making him like he's going to be a major player in Hollywood.
Yeah, because he's number one. He's got the lineage.
Yep.
He's got the lineage as a character actor too, having played a massive character. Guy. Yeah, and he can clearly act the hell out of a character that's very hard to pull off.
When you think of like putting him in a Marvel universe, I will go back to a character that he can take his mask off and often, well, not often, but he does from time to time, and that's Doctor Doom. Like I think he would be a phenomenal Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
Or do you want him to be the bad guy, or do you want him to be a good guy? That's the thing.
I don't know. I don't even know if I want him in a Marvel property or anything, but just he's going to get that post-show huge bump that some other actors get, like notably like Jensen Ackles is getting post Supernatural, right? Like he exploded once that show wrapped up, and once he had time.
He got mad paid to be on The Boys last season.
Oh yeah, then he's animated Batman for a couple of properties. Like people are trying to get him in other DC stuff, and like he's probably going to. Because he knows so many in that circle of, Kripke and Gunn and all those guys. So that's probably going to happen at some point. So we'll see what happens there. But like, yeah, Peck, the whole cast, I mean.
This week's episode was fucking hilarious.
Like the whole concept of turning Spock human is something that they could only have dreamed of realistically in the 60s. Because they did the whole thing with Spock's brain, right? That was the whole thing. But like this is. The way they end up wrapping this up, it just worked really, really well. And obviously continues the serialized, that kind of interconnected serialized character growth with him and Jess Bush's Christine Chapel.
Yep.
But everything with Spock learning how to be human, stand out incredible. Like the whole thing with him like losing his shit on Sam Kirk. It was like, don't test me, Kirk. I will break you. Like the whole thing. Because Kirk is a very sloppy eater, I guess, and it just really sets Spock on edge. Love that. The whole thing with him being able to uncontrollably control his outbursts and stuff.
Discovering bacon.
Yeah, him discovering the wonders of bacon because he'd never smelled it before. The whole thing with the trying to hide the fact that he's human from his Vulcan soon-to-be in-laws, hopefully. And then the repercussions do matter. Like, his fiance calls him out on, like, you didn't tell me. What the fuck is wrong with you? Like, basically a Vulcan, hey, we need to take a break.
Yep. Because
that was pretty bad. And then, obviously, the further of the romance with him and Christine Chapel. And yet it's not melodramatic. Like, it's really deftly handled character growth and character interactions without being over the top, which I really like about this show. It could fall into that trap, like this Discovery fell into that trap. Discovery had great characters that got really melodramatic.
Okay.
Star Trek shouldn't be a melodrama. Not to me. The best Trek stuff is not melodramatic. It's not Riverdale, you know? Like it's not CW,
No.
you know? So I think this show is in that pocket very firmly for the better. So what'd you think of this week's?
Had a blast. It did feel much in the tradition of the TOS stories. Like you have a balance of like serious acting but being pushed up against the comedy and going back and forth with the cutscenes. Ethan Peck was great. It does create the whole thing with, because remember this is the TOS, like the true what we know as the TOS timeline, right?
Mm-hmm.
This does
Technically, it
create.
could be the TOS is now in its own timeline, and everything else, TNG, Voyager, Discovery, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise are in their own timeline.
That's true. That's
Technically.
true. Technically, yes, yes. I liked the whole the relationship building with Chapel and Spock, and it does create an interesting thing going forward, especially with her character wanting to do different things, not necessarily related to um, the Enterprise. Um, I do like the bonding the last two episodes between Spock and Pike, because obviously we've had Kirk show up for James T. Kirk show up for 2 episodes, 2 or 3 episodes, 3 episodes,
Two now.
two now. The finale and then a couple weeks ago. Um, he wasn't involved with the Enterprise per se, so we have to establish some type of bond building between Spock and Kirk, right? Because when TOS kicks in, they're not the best of friends, but then they have a deep relationship, right?
Yeah.
So
And we know Kirk is coming back for one more episode this season, at
yeah.
least.
So I don't know when you want to start doing a transition, or if he become. I mean, he's a captain of his own ship, so he's not going
Not
to be
yet.
part.
He's a lieutenant right now.
He's a lieutenant. You're right. You're correct.
In the
You're correct.
prime timeline, he's a lieutenant right now.
Yeah.
I wonder
So
how they're gonna make it, because like in canon, he's never met Pike until he takes over the Enterprise.
yes, yeah,
So
that's right.
what weird shenanigans are they gonna get up to so that when Kirk comes on the Enterprise, Pike's not there? That's gonna be very very interesting to watch.
Yeah, it does make me kind of sad though, because a lot of these characters are going to have to either have a tragic ending to their story or be branched off into separate spaces. But you don't have to get there right now. You know, this is the 5 year window leading up to Kirk taking over the Enterprise, so you could tell a few more stories, some really good stories. And if they put it on film as a major motion picture, that's fine. Do one or two. I think that'd be good. But I really like this cast, man. And I like, if I had my say, I would say you would just keep going, just keep telling stories with these guys. I
Yeah, I don't
really
think you
like
make the transition to movies. I think
Star Trek. Just
you ride it out.
it just, as great as like
I
the
mean, it
Kelvin
can
verse is.
work. See Wrath of Khan. See Voyage
Yeah,
Home. It
but
can work.
look at the box office numbers for those. Those are considered classics, but look at those box office numbers.
Yeah,
They don't
they
blow you
weren't
away.
blowing you away, and that level of movies don't get made anymore. That is what we would probably call like a $40 million movie. They don't exist anymore,
No,
right? Like movies like that don't get made. Like
no,
even
it's you,
Deadpool ballooned up to almost 100 million,
yeah.
right?
For studios, it's either you hit for single or you hit a home run. That's how they.
Yeah,
That's
they're
how this
going
works.
like, cheap, right? Like Missing, right? Stuff like
Or
that,
blockbuster.
or they're going blockbuster. That middle of the road movie, it's not impossible to be made, but it is very rare. And I don't see Paramount having the patience to go that route with Star Trek, even though that's its best route in the theaters.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to pull in Mission Impossible money. It's just not. But if you would be comfortable with a $30 million opening, maybe that's not so bad. But I don't know if they are.
I keep thinking about the Kelvin verse, the fourth film, and as much as I really liked that cast and that alternate universe, Star Trek Beyond was a really good, fun Star Trek film, and it did poorly in the box office.
Yeah.
I just don't, it's just, it doesn't resonate with casual moviegoers like people want to think. Like you said, like people like us that are big sci-fi geeks, it works for us because it's like, damn, I love this show. Or, I love the storytelling, I love the adventures, the concepts, and it could still work on the small screen. But I think coming out of the strike, it's going to present a big challenge because of cost. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are parts of Stranger Worlds I could have seen as like an hour and a half movie, but if anything, I think it needs to be a like a Paramount exclusive movie, not go to theaters.
Sure.
You know, like basically do a 2-part episode or something and just make it a movie.
But the shows like this one and Discovery early on, Next Generation, they do well because they tell a bunch of different stories that take place in
Exactly.
space. And
Yeah.
it works. It works because it's like our job is to cover this expansive universe outside of Earth, and like shit happens everywhere, and it makes sense versus like focusing on one event. And don't get me wrong, it can work because season 3 of Picard did work that way, and those TOS movies, several of them are just focused on like with when you go from Wrath of Khan to Search for Spock, it's technically one long story,
And then
right?
Voyage Home right
And then
after.
Voyage Home, like that trilogy, which for me, that's a fun like back to back to back three movies right there. But they did okay in the box office. They weren't
That
blowing the
just
doors
it's
off.
just isn't going to get made today like that.
No, something like that won't. And I think especially coming out of the strike, studio execs are going to be very, 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 very nervous to spend that kind of money. And
Yeah.
I don't think I think as much as we were talking about once again going into pre-production of the fourth Abrams Star Trek movie, I think it's done. I think
Yeah,
we're
I
done.
don't think you bother. The only thing you do is if you're Paramount, you see if you could get Pine back for some Altverse stories. You know, and maybe Kento. But he isn't. Is he retired from acting? I haven't seen him in anything.
He's been very low key the last few years, man. I'll be honest with you.
And
Yeah.
not that that's a bad thing at all. It's just I
No.
wonder, is he?
I think I think he did state that he would love to do the fourth film. I think it was like a year or two ago. He was on a red carpet event where he said he really wanted to do a third film. I mean, a fourth film. But you know what? You're right. They can bring those because we've established alt universes and timelines in this
Yeah,
you know
you absolutely
infrastructure.
could.
You could pull them in for episodes or for an arc or something, and it
You know,
can
like
work.
build the set back for, the Abrams verse and have him on that Enterprise, and like that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it would
Let's-
be cool, man. There's stories that you can tell, or you could do some type of Star Trek anthology show where you do different stories from different characters. And I know a lot of them want to do some more Star Trek. I mean, Pine said he would like to, but I think the big thing for Pine is he wants a lot of money from Paramount.
And he is a big name,
That's fair.
you know,
Like I said though, coming out of the
because
strike,
he
I
had been
think
a
he
lead
gets.
for a long time.
I mean, yeah,
He had led
yeah,
several movies before Star Trek.
and he was, and before four was like right when four got scrapped, he had become the next Jack Ryan. He was in
Yeah,
a Jack Ryan film, so yeah, he was starting to, and then Wonder Woman really kicked him up a notch, and then 184 just that wasn't him.
yeah,
That was
just
a
a bad
petty thing.
movie.
Um, like I said, I think the biggest problem, and it does worry me coming out of the strike, if some of these big production shows like Strange New Worlds is a pretty pricey. Season 2 was a lot more expensive than season 1. I
I
think
will
that
say, they're using their money well because it
no,
looks
no, no. Yeah,
gorgeous.
it's well spent. Like the CGI is phenomenal for a TV show. Um, I think some of these shows get the chopping block pretty, coming out of the strike, and I would hate for this one to be cut just because apparently it's doing wonderful numbers for Paramount Plus. So,
Yeah,
um,
you gotta
yeah,
imagine it's driving some serious subscriptions.
this and what is it, Yellowstone, the
Yeah, the Yellowstone
1918 whatever,
prequels. Yeah,
the prequels are doing really well for them. So, um, I brings up you brought this up. I think it's a good point. After Dead Reckoning 2, you talk about doing a Mission Impossible TV show. I think that would sell very well for Paramount, you know?
yeah, yeah. I really think it would. And the funny thing is, if you were to bring back Maggie Q for that kind of show, because that's basically what Nikita was, where
Yeah.
it was a Mission Impossible like series, and it was amazing. Absolutely, I bought it on Blu-ray. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing that like this was on CW. This was on the CW.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? It's amazing. It was basically a Fox show on the CW, and it was fucking awesome. It was around the same time as Fringe, so it was in that era of television. But man, like late stage network TV. Oh, there were some fucking gems, dude. Like Person of Interest was another one.
But those things were grueling, man, because they were pumping out
Oh,
like
they were
20
doing too many episodes. Nikita
episodes.
was shorter though.
Yeah, that was.
Nikita had a more a concise run. It was really only like 3.5 seasons, and they gave it a 6 episode run at the end, which network TV is they don't do that anymore. Like the CW, the former president, he would be like, "Hey, what do you need to finish your story? Cool, you got it. I don't care." Like he just did that. They didn't need to give Nikita more episodes. Not that many people watched it, but they did, and it was awesome. That was amazing. I can't believe they did it, and it worked
Yeah,
really well.
yeah, network TV was so focused on ad revenue, but like streaming services have changed that. Where we go next with streaming services, I still think that we could still have the smaller model, which means actors that traditionally have worked on network shows don't want to work on it. Like, what's his name? Stephen Amell basically said, I would love to do a mini series of Arrow, but I'm not doing a network show ever again.
No,
He said that.
I do
I
think we end up
refuse to
going
work on
back now that,
network.
especially if the numbers get more transparent. And let's just transition into some strike talk stuff,
Sure, sure,
state of
sure.
the industry stuff. Um, for me, we've talked about it before, but Netflix's ad tier seems to be doing pretty well actually.
Yep.
And I imagine, especially once if I can't imagine they're going to be able to keep the numbers transparent. The only way they're going to be able to keep the investor money rolling in is for everybody in the market to go back to an ad-supported tier. Because clearly there's money there, and it's an untapped
Yep.
avenue for most of these streamers to have an ad-supported tier. And on the consumer side, for honestly, it just sounds more stable, right? Because it's almost like what streaming was billed as, which is the next generation of network television. Network TV has always been ad-supported, and it was stable and worked for how many years? 50 plus?
60 years. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's worked longer than Star Trek's been around, so at least 60 years. So it's a model that works, and you marry that with streaming technology. Clearly, there's a future there, and it will also lead to more stable residuals and all that once they can actually get a good contract. And I absolutely hope they do. They've got every reason in the world to strike. They have been getting fucked with the change to streaming because the contract was just before the change to streaming. Like their contract has been old, and they didn't like like not old, but like they when did they last renegotiate? Do they have a 10-year deal? When? How often is it? Is it every 5 years?
I think it's every 5 or 6 years,
Five sounds right.
but they kind of just blew through the last CBA. Like the collective bargaining last time was just shot right
Yeah,
through.
it
You
didn't. They didn't fight it. And again,
know,
back then, streaming. Think about what it was 5 years ago. We were pre-COVID. It was an entirely different world of entertainment media. AI wasn't even a twinkle in like anyone's eye in terms of what it could do for content. Yet, like everything has changed so fast, so quickly in the last since the last contract they signed that and it's all been for the worse for your working actors and writers. So they absolutely needed to strike. So it'll be interesting to see how long it goes on. And I can't
you
believe
know,
how hard some of
w-
the execs have stepped in it.
well, Bob Iger really just he didn't do himself and he didn't do any exec any favor. The news leaking out that they're trying to starve out the directors, the writers is like, and the actors get involved. I think the biggest part of it all, and it's not Sean Gunn's, commentary because yeah, he got his studios mixed up, but if you were listening to what Sean Gunn said, he made a valid point, right? The reality is that most actors are working actors in Hollywood. On top of the fact, you and I both know this, for every one actor that's out there that's a working actor, not a top billed, high paying actor. I'm talking about for every regular working actor that's well known in Hollywood, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people living in LA that are failed actors, that try to get into the business, that may have gotten small jobs here and there, may have gotten background. Hell, you and I came from the Rooster Teeth community. Joel Heyman was a guy that was in the background of several episodes of TV shows before his career took off with Rooster Teeth when they founded, Rooster Teeth and Red versus Blue, right? Well, now we're talking about that. Hey, yeah, the studios wanted to implement a part of their clause in their new collective bargaining that states that any background actor they can own their likeness in perpetuity. And I know what that is because I've seen enough business deals in my life that I know what that was. For them, that's like, okay, if we get an actor's likeness that's be a background actor or an extra, we get their likeness in a contract that we can use in perpetuity. At some point, if that actor blows up, we can still try to find ways to push the envelope to use their likeness, even though
Yeah.
they're now a big name actor because they signed this deal. How do I know that? Because that's what the fucking record studio industry does with masters, owning masters of like music and stuff like that. I had this conversation with my wife because she was like, "Okay, I know how I kind of understand the idea. Help me out." And I think the perfect story for folks that really don't know how this whole thing works with likeness and masters of music and all that stuff, owning of the IP, go read up about the story with Taylor Swift and her previous record label. That's a really good example and how she had to re-record everything to get her quote unquote masters back and all that stuff, right?
And
Um,
who was it that had Prince's?
Prince
Didn't
owns all his
no
shit.
no it
No,
was no it was someone of his era where somebody bought all of them.
Michael Jackson bought the Beatles
That's what it
catalog.
was. Yeah, like
In
stuff
the
like
in
that.
the in the 80s, the Beatles catalog, I forget the name of the record studio that they originally had it, but Michael Jackson, like in the 80s into the 90s, was worth like almost half a billion. Like that
Yeah.
dude was super rich and he pissed it all away, right? But at one point he just casually bought the Beatles catalog. Like he was having a conversation with Paul McCartney. Like they were doing their song, I think it's Say or in the 80s, and he was like, he just casually told him, "Hey, I just bought your catalog." Like, what the fuck? Like Paul McCartney is like, "What? Like I'm supposed to just stand here and just like," but that's how the industry worked, you know? A lot of studios own the masters, and that's how they would get musicians was to sign those deals. Well, that's how actors get caught in because they sign them for 3 picture deals for blockbusters. So that way, that's where Scarlett Johansson got kind of screwed with the Black Widow in that her overall encompassing Marvel contract didn't include like an actual lead role, right? And then she filmed that movie, and then it went straight to streaming. Which apparently she, in the lawsuit, it came out that she basically told Disney like, "Hey, part of my deal was that this has to go to the studio. I mean, to the theater, and you're telling me it's not." And so she lost a lot of money off of that, but then she ended up suing, getting like $25 million in court off of it. But that was the beginning of
And
this whole thing.
another an analogy would be like, remember that oh my god, what was that Chris Hemsworth one with the is the remake of Kurt Russell with the Russians invading?
Oh, Red Dawn.
Red Dawn.
Red Dawn.
That was filmed way before he blew up.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Lawrence has had movies like that where she
Yep.
filmed stuff way before she blew up, and
Yep.
they put them out after they blow up.
After the blow up.
Now
Yep.
imagine that you sign that deal, you get your body scanned in, and it's like really high res detailed,
Yep.
like able to be built in Unreal 5 kind of future tech stuff, and then you blow up and they can just take your likeness because they own it.
Yep.
That's what we're talking. Like,
Yep.
it is a awful, awful deal for anyone, let alone even if you blow up to be like A-list, but like, say you're someone that shows up and you're a fantastic character actor in like a Parks and Rec kind of show,
Yep.
and then they just own your likeness, even though you would then go on to be in other sitcoms and stuff, and then they just keep putting you in their own universe's IP stuff, and you don't get
Yep.
paid for that. That's horseshit.
Yep.
So, like, as soon as that came out, I was like, okay, number one, I can't believe they thought they'd try to get that in the contract and have it just sail through, right?
Yep.
Like, that just takes an insane amount of ignorance. And then, of course, they are striking over that. Like, if, like, from what it sounds like, as soon as the actors were like, no, as soon as right then and there, they just, negotiations broke down.
So I think the thing that gets overlooked in this is that Hollywood execs are one, they're idiots because if you look at their history with getting in the way of so many movies, um, it's unparalleled. Now people say, well, this movie was tweaked here and it made it better. Did it? We don't know the full story of like what
Yeah, some
Hollywood execs
constraint
are
is
separate.
good.
Yeah, some constraints are good. Obviously, like I brought it up earlier, Wonder Woman 1984. It came out that the studio basically was trying to get to rein in Patty Jenkins because she was over the top, but they let her do it her style, and it turned out really bad, right? Versus, there's all these like, yes, there's always an example of the other side of
Or
like,
like,
hey,
hey, Fox tried to kill, Deadpool until someone leaked the footage.
yeah,
Like, that's one of those, like, the execs didn't think that would work. Are you insane? Kind of moments. That's the kind of dumb bullheaded shit we're dealing with as these
but
executives.
I think like one of the bigger ones for me was the second Crow movie, City of Angels, which is just a horrible film. Miramax, Harvey Weinstein. Everyone knows he's got this, the studio and the asshole. He stepped in and stepped all over that movie because the director they hired, it was supposed to be a completely separate film from that first, Brandon Lee movie, right? And they produced it, cut it, ready to go. And it was supposed to be like a 2.5 hour long movie. It was a great dark story. Apparently, the original script was phenomenal. But then Harvey Weinstein came in and basically told them at the last minute, no, it needs to be an extension of The Crow, of the first film. So he made them cut it up and chop it up. It didn't make any sense. The story just was mishmash. And there was one of the examples of a studio exec coming in thinking that they know better. And there's lots of those. You can hear stories about those online all the time. I think a really great podcast folks should listen to if you want to know about these stories is go listen to Michael Rosenbaum's
Oh
podcast on a
yeah.
regular basis. Because when he sits down with an actor across from him, if it's someone he's worked with, they share their struggles with stories in Hollywood on movies and TV shows they've worked on. Or if it's a different, like if it's a completely different person like that he's never worked with before, he pulls that stuff out of him. He's as good as Howard Stern. It's a controversial take, but Howard Stern to me is one of the best interviewers out there on radio, like in the radio industry, because he managed to, yeah, a lot of his stuff is raunchy, but in terms of like if you listen to the back and forth of those interviews, he really got some good content out of it. Michael Rosenbaum does a phenomenal job with that in his podcast. I highly recommend it. But one thing you always hear about is like just the studios. Ron Perlman shit on Hollywood, on that podcast. And a lot of these guys that are a little outspoken, you hear them talk about their struggles, and you hear about the struggles of other people. And so, when I think about that, I also think about that Kevin Smith story where he talks about doing that Superman Reborn. And I know we got our little cameo in the Flash, which was cool. But if you hear the back end of his conversation about that story, what's his name? Tim Burton was the director attached to that Superman Reborn film. He had a pay or play contract. The studio paid him $20 million. Pay or play means they get that money regardless if they do the production or not. So Tim Burton, he's a big name director, the studio gave him $20 million to do essentially nothing with that film. And I think about things like that where it's like we have writers, we have directors that may not be top billed like that. I get that, but there's the point distribution on the back end could be a lot better on all forms, both
Yeah.
cinema, streaming, for writers, upcoming directors, actors. It has to be a better system. Whereas these studios are just netting out fuck tons of money at the back end if it's a unexpected hit, and that has to stop. In my opinion.
Yeah, like if you think, like sports contracts are crazy,
Oh yeah,
try Hollywood.
yeah,
This shit's wild.
yep.
Like how the
There
points
was
work
a
and everything, it is just
there was
nuts.
like a 4-year span in the early 2000s where Will Smith made like almost $300 million off of Hancock, off of I can't think of all the movies he was on. Like there, The Pursuit of Happiness. Like there was a stretch there of about 3 or 4 years where he was making like $20 million plus back end points. He made a fuck ton off of Hancock off back end points.
Yeah,
Like he
because he had
made
the
like
leverage to get an amazing contract.
yeah, he ended up making like almost like $60 million off of the back end for Hancock. And so, and I'm not saying that they're not deserving of it, because if they have the ability to pull in people and put butts in the seats in theaters to make the movie money, I'm all for that. But I'm talking about the structure of where we have this dichotomy of like way up top and way down bottom, and like we don't have this balance in the middle, and it's not fair for studios
Yeah,
because like
the
I
models
think
have
music.
removed the middle class
Yeah.
actor.
Yep, it has, and it is, and a hit like Everything Everywhere All at Once, a lot of those actors are now making money again, or making money on subsequent productions, right? Whereas that movie made a fuck ton of money for A24, and I'm not dissing them because so far we haven't heard a lot of bad stories, but I get that they're going to have classical Hollywood contracts, right? Just like every other studio would. But like these actors can now go out there and make money on other subsequent films, but they should have hopefully they did have a good point system, and I don't know how that movie worked, but like Crazy Rich Asians was another one that blew up,
Yeah, blew up a
right?
lot of people that
And I'm
hadn't been
hoping that,
exposed to Western audiences.
but a lot of those folks don't have point deals. None of them do, actually. Most of them don't. So there has to be a better system in place. With the implementation of AI, there's a very dangerous game we're walking with execs trying to say, I think the perfect example is Secret Invasion's intro. Fucking horrible intro
Well, and
to a
realistically,
fucking horrible
the
show.
AI should be the CEO.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
in terms of making the analytic decisions.
yeah.
It's just
I think this the fact that the actors got that SAG got involved, it's great because you're hearing stories,
yeah,
testimonials from
yeah.
a
The
lot of
skeletons are
actors.
coming out of the closet right now.
Yep, yep.
And
You're
I
starting to
saw
see how.
a post. It was like, so Hollywood execs really wanted to push so hard that the actors paid millions for their communication skills are now going to tell everyone the truth. Good business strategy, I guess.
Yeah,
Like, let's see how well that goes for them.
yeah,
So that it'll be an interesting story to follow as the summer goes into. I'm sure this will drag on into the fall,
yep,
which is one of the big reasons we'll be changing some things on the podcast. But
yeah.
that's for a
But,
later date.
but man, we over the last 6 years, there's been a ton of content. Start watching some back catalog,
Oh
please,
yeah,
guys. There's a lot of great
get
shit
caught
out
up
there
on
that.
amazing shows. The
Yep.
shows I rant about. Go get caught up on them. Oh,
You and I,
did I
you and
talk
I
about
can go
pneumonia
watch.
yet?
You and I can go watch Yellowstone. Hey, it's apparently a good
Eh,
show.
I don't vibe with it. I've tried. It's just
Uh,
some of like the messages. It's just like very, hey, liberals bad, conservatives good. Like that's the kind of messaging to it.
okay, okay,
That's how
okay.
reductive it gets in points.
That's fair.
I just not a fan of that kind of storytelling. Which I don't care if you got a conservative viewpoint, but like just the blanket say, hey, liberals are stupid and wrong. What? Why? Clearly it's successful, but also it's stupid. Um, Nimona. Watch it.
Nimona.
Watch it
Nimona.
like tonight, maybe. It's an hour and a half. It's an animated movie. Essentially, not like I said it in when we were streaming Fortnite. Uh, say like so this medieval fantasy story happens, but knights don't go away because they perceive this like outside threat of these monsters, so they keep training knights and having them be protectors of the realm, and like they're big well-known heroes, kind of superheroes ish, and they have future tech, and like their swords shoot lasers and stuff, and but they still wear like armor and have the swords and all that. And then there's this shape-shifting character that may or may not be the monster everyone is afraid of, and then how it ties into that kingdom's like origin and like how it came to be, and the message they have at the end with that shape-shifting character and our lead actor facing off with the kingdom for like to kind of show them why they're wrong. It's very, very emotional at the end in a way I was not expecting for a movie that was that fun. I think I was watching someone that was like, hey, it's like if DreamWorks still gave a shit. I'm like, okay, you got me.
Okay.
Like if Shrek era DreamWorks did a more animated style show or a movie because it's an hour and a half, fantastic. Absolutely go
Okay.
watch it.
Okay. I'll give it a watch.
All right, I think that's gonna do it for episode 71. 72 will be roughly 2 weeks. We'll have Justified, City Primeval, as well as Good Omens Season 2 out on streaming. That'll be on FX, on Hulu Plus, Amazon Prime, respectively. So we'll talk those. 73 will be TMNT, and I'm hoping maybe with Jackie and pizza, because that seems very fitting. August 17th-ish will be Strange New Worlds finale. We'll talk Season 2 as a whole, our favorite episodes and moments. And then September 6th will be episode 75, our 3-year anniversary. And we're going to talk Justified City Primeval's finale. That's the plan for roughly the next month and a half. So, see you, everybody. Pathos, you've been in chat. Thanks for hanging around. Chris, you were here earlier. Thanks for hanging around. I'll see you guys probably sometime this week. Not sure when I'm going to play more games. Diablo Season 2 starts soon, so we'll see what happens there. Plus, I got to do my Spider-Man playthrough before things. And we got to get ready for college football. I'm very excited. So, stay tuned on social media. I'm at MrWartburg. Patrick is at It's Mr. Fusion. And we'll see you next time.
Take
Bye.
care.